US-Israeli war in Iran is escalating with each passing day, while US President Donald Trump claims that the war in Iran is nearing its end. It has now entered its second week and seems to be far from over. Democrats warn that as the war rages on, the risk of the US getting dragged into another prolonged conflict in West Asia is going up. From Democrat Chuck Schumer to Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, top Democrats have expressed dissatisfaction at Trump's claims regarding the ongoing war.
I am left with more questions than answers, especially about the cost of the war. My questions have been unanswered, and I guess I am most concerned about the threat to American lives of potentially deploying our sons and daughters on the ground in Iran. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here.
Now, to Trump's explanation about his war in Iran grows more confusing and more contradictory every hour. Yesterday, hey folks, can we have a little quiet? Trump's explanation about his war, as I say, grows more confusing, more contradictory every hour almost. Yesterday, Trump casually claimed, I think the war is very complete, pretty much. But this morning, Hegseth stood before the cameras and announced that today will be the most intense day of strikes yet, involving, quote, the most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes, unquote. Which is it? Is the war ending soon, or are we on the brink of the worst fighting yet? Donald Trump's a liar. He claims that Iranian Tomahawk missiles were responsible for the bombing of an all girls school that unfortunately killed 170 people, many of them children. Iran doesn't have Tomahawk missiles. The claim is beyond asinine. It's just an outright lie. The president can't just talk off the top of his head on something as formidable as this. The President of the United States is spreading blatant lies.
Some Democrats say they would resist any request for further funding. Many add that Trump failed to seek congressional authorization to begin the war. Top Democrat Elizabeth Warren strongly denounced the Iran war following a closed-door briefing on Operation Epic Fury. Warren said, and I quote, "The one thing Congress has the power to do is to stop actions like this through the power of the purse. This is not a war supported by this country, and this is not a war that makes us safer." Senator Mark Kelly, a retired Navy captain, also said the U.S. doesn't appear to be nearing the end of the war after leaving the meeting. He said, and I quote, "Clearly, they do not have a strategic goal. They didn't have a plan. They have no timeline. Because of that, they have no exit strategy." And joining us on this broadcast is international security expert Dr. John Blaxland from Washington, D.C. Doctor, it's good to see you and thank you very much for your time. There is support from the Republicans on their president in this war, but America or Americans are divided about the goal of this war. What do you say?
Yeah, there's so many different perspectives on this war that it's actually hard to get your head around. I think it's useful to step back and think of this in a number of categories: politically, legally, technologically, logistically, geographically, historically. And I like to start with history because I think, you know, people are saying this is an illegal war and it's been started, 10 to 11 days ago. I'm wondering whether or not we're using the wrong paradigm to think about this. I think the 100 Years' War of a few hundred years ago in Europe is perhaps a more suitable kind of parallel to draw. This is a conflict that goes back to 1979, if not the bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon in 1983, and the various waves of conflict between the United States and Iran, as well as Israel and Iran, going back, almost half a century. So this is a significant manifestation of that conflict, I would say. This is not something that just came out of the blue. It's not ab initio. This is a continuation of a long-standing conflict. I'd also add that, the famous Greek historian Thucydides talked about the causes of war being about fear, honour and interests. And in my mind, those three words really speak volumes about what's at stake here. The sense of fear across the Gulf region, the sense of honour in the United States, in Israel and in Iran, let alone across the Gulf, and the interests, the competing interests here at play, existential interests for Israel and for Iran, and now evidently for the Gulf states as well. So this is really, interestingly, a very complicated situation. And as your previous speakers pointed out, there's a real issue in terms of what the United States is doing. The United States has three arms of government: the executive, the legislative and the judiciary. And the executive, the president, obviously, operating in a way that is surprising. Previous presidents have sought to garner a coalition and sought to outline their case before international forums like the United Nations to garner support and to enlist that and get the logistic support and pre-positioning of forces such that you actually have enough to not just win by a margin, but win convincingly. That doesn't seem to have been the case this time. The United States has been prepared to act virtually unilaterally, albeit with the Israelis alongside, but they haven't sought to get the traditional alliance structure out of NATO or other countries like Australia until after the fact. So that's been quite surprising, and it's particularly surprising given what appears to be a focus on Iran as a facilitator of unrest in the wider Middle East, particularly with Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and of course Hamas in Palestine, and in the Israel-Palestine space. So it's really interesting to think about how this is going to unfold, given that Iran has been backed by China to a certain extent. It's being supported by Russia as well. And of course, there are so many spillover effects in terms of China's footprint in the Middle East, Russia's ability to now gain more revenue from the oil spigot being released and the price going up. And there's more to, there's more to say on a range of fronts, particularly geographically, technologically and logistically. And of course, how does this all...
Doctor, sorry to cut you short, but let's just go back to the statements being made by the president and also the confusion that is really playing out in the Congress, because some of these U.S. officials, including the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and the State Secretary, Marco Rubio, have been giving conflicting reports to the Congress. And I will actually read some of the statements coming from the Congress and some of the senators, what they're saying. Warren says, this is not a war that makes us safer. There's another senator who says, this is Mark Kelly, he says, clearly they do not have a strategic goal, they didn't have a plan, they have no timeline. Because of that, they have no exit strategy. What can Congress do at this moment? What can they really do? If this is a real big problem, what can they do to avert the problem?
So it's been pretty evident that with the Republicans being prepared to support the president, the Congress virtually can do no more than it has already. But I'm just not sure it's fair to categorise this as completely without any strategy. I think there's lots of points of criticism here, and I understand the views that have been shared, and I'm not completely averse to them. But I think it is useful to think about the fact that President Trump has really, throughout both terms in office, seen Iran as an enemy and has, his objection to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in his first term, his hostility towards Iran back then, perhaps constrained by the so-called adults in the room that were operating around him, that prevented him from taking more precipitous action back then. My sense is that circumstances over the last 12 months, with the over the last 2 years, really, with the actions that Israel has taken against the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas, that really changed the equation, and it made the attack last year against Iran more feasible, and then this year a repeat attempt when what happened last year wasn't completely successful in President Trump's eyes, let alone the Israelis' eyes. So I think we need to be careful not to be sucked in too much into one side or the other's politicized interpretation of what is yet to completely unfold, because really, to be honest, this could prove completely catastrophic. Or we might see in the next couple of days that this is actually, it might the gamble that paid off. It doesn't look like that from here right now, but warfare has a way of surprising us. Plans get unravelled day by day. There are iterations of things that can change things. And here we're seeing, particularly on the technology front, the use of drones, it's a game changer. We've been watching the use of drones in Ukraine for the last few years and been thinking, well, we probably one of these days we must catch up. And all of a sudden, across the Gulf, across the United States, NATO and other allies, all realizing that this is now a way bigger issue than we've thought of before. And of course, we're now butting up against logistic limits. The exquisite but super expensive, precise missile systems that have cost millions of dollars, that are hard to replace, that are very good at what they do. But when you run out of them, you face a real problem. And there's a saying, quality has a quantity all of its own. And I think we're running up against that now. And in terms of the outcome of the war, this is something, while President Trump might want to say he's going to have the final say, the other side gets to have a vote too.
Dr. John Blaxland, we'll have to leave this discussion there. Thank you very much for your time and for talking to us today.
Good to talk to you, Amin.